Hey, hello everyone. This is Dave, N6 Alpha Foxtrot Victor. I'm going to be doing a little video here on how to use the CPS for the Connect Systems CS-580, which is a relatively new radio that Connect Systems has come out with. It's a nice little radio. I have one. I enjoy using it. And I just thought I'd go through how to use the CPS, which means customer programming software or channel programming software, I guess, depending on how you look at it. But basically the CPS, which allows you to program repeaters and talk groups into your radio to make it more useful. I know there's a lot of people that are going to be starting out with DMR, and they'll buy a CS-580, or they might buy an MD-380 or something similar. And the principles in this video are fairly applicable to most other CPS programming. So what you learn from this will come in handy if you get a different radio. At any rate, let's start out first by looking at a little document. There's a couple of things that you need to do before you start working on your radio, or not before you start working on your radio, but before you can complete, that's the better way to put it, before you can complete the programming process. Number one is you need to make sure that you have a DMR ID. Here is the website to get the registration done. You'll scroll down to the bottom and you'll be registering as an individual user, more or less. But at any rate, you put in the information, they send you your DMR ID. That is a number that will be put into the radio so that when you transmit on the DMR network, it identifies who you are. There's some people that have some issues with this. Personally, I don't have an issue. Take it up with the DMR group if you don't like it, I suppose. The second thing that you'll need, obviously, is the CPS software. CPS software is available here. The other thing that comes in handy is the manual for the CPS software, and it, for whatever reason, does not seem to appear directly on the Connect Systems website. I was unable to find it, but I did do a Google search, and I came up with this link right here, and that will take you to it's a Word document that has the manual. So download these two pieces of software, the CPS itself and the manual. And the manual tells you how to install the software, so read through the manual and get it going. And the manual is a nice backup for what we're going to be talking about here in the video. The second thing that you're going to get, or the second things that you need to get, really, you need to get your local repeater frequencies, their color codes, and their talk group lineup, along with the time slot information. Now, this is something that you can typically find online. For example, if you look at the information I have here, this is from one of the local DMR systems in my area. This is not an exhaustive list, but it's just it's one of them. But I can go to their website and they'll click on the DMR link and it will show me what's available. For other repeaters, you may have to look them up online. Sometimes what I've done is I'll put the name of a city and I'll put DMR repeaters and then see what comes up. There are other applications like RFinder that allow you to get that information, but frankly I found sometimes the RFinder information is either obsolete or out of date or just plain wrong, so take it with a grain of salt. And once you have all that information, now you are ready to start up the CPS. Now, I've already installed it on my system, so I'm going to go to my DMR folder here. I'm going to bring up the software, and when it first comes up, you kind of look at it, well, there's not a whole lot there, and that can sometimes be intimidating for people. But let's start by going to Files and click on New. Now, it'll come up with a little message window. It says, please select the model and frequency range. I leave that in the default position because that's basically, it's that radio and that covers the ham band frequencies, so we're just going to go with that. Click OK. Choose on it a little bit, and then it comes up with this. And again, device information, I didn't change any of that. I left it as is. I would recommend that you do the same unless there is a compelling reason to do otherwise. Click on General Settings. Now here, the device ID is going to be the DMR ID that you receive from the DMR group. The repeater ID is only significant if you're actually using a BFDX repeater. I'm going to assume that most of you are not, so don't worry about that. Leave it alone. I basically leave everything in the default position. I don't select passwords for programming or power on. The only thing that I change is I go to the enhanced scanning. I change the minimum to 441. I change the maximum to 445. And then receiver to transmit offset is 5 megahertz. And then channel separation, or channel spacing rather, I set mine to 25 kilohertz. Theoretically, DMR can operate on a 12.5 kilohertz channel separation. In practice, the repeaters that I've worked with are on 25 kilohertz boundaries. And the larger the channel spacing that you use, the faster the scanning will run through the frequency range, and you'll have a better chance of picking up a signal. So I do that. It's up to you how you want to change it, but that's how I set mine up. Okay, once we've gotten that done, now we have to do, we add our contact list. Now, what we call talk groups, CS calls transmit and receive contacts. And so when you go back to your document, you'll notice that we have talk groups. Each talk group is going to have an ID number, and it's going to have a time slot. Now that time slot may vary from repeater to repeater, so make sure that you know which time slot the talk group is on. Recently there's been something of an agreement among the Seabridge and Brandmeister repeater owners where they've agreed that local talk groups, they're going to try and put in time slot 2, and anything outside of local groups, they're going to put in time slot 1. So in this case, you'll notice there's a talk group called SNARS. Well, that is the name of the local amateur radio club. It's in time slot 2 because it's a local talk group. Whereas like North America, you'll notice that it's in time slot 1 because it's outside of that local area. Another interesting deal is that there is a talk group called Parrot, and what Parrot allows you to do is when you select that talk group, you can transmit on it, and then there will be a short delay, and then the system will repeat back to you your audio, so you can hear how you're getting into a repeater, make sure that it's, you know, that the audio sounds good or whatever. But the Seabridge, which was we just call Parrot right here, has one ID. The Parrot for Brandmeister has a different ID. The Seabridge, my understanding is that is a group call. However, the Brandmeister Parrot is a private call, and that will become significant when we look at some of the programming. But basically, you need to have this ready to go so that you can program it in. So what we're going to do is go back to the CPS, and I'm going to right-click on Digital, and I'm going to add a group call. Okay, now then, call ID. That is going to be the talk group that we selected. So let's say we want to add the SNARS group. So that's 31328. So in here, I go 31328. Okay, that's my call group. Now I'm going to right-click on this, and I'm going to rename it, and I'm going to call it SNARS. So now I have a new talk group, a new digital contact rather, called SNARS. Now then, I'm going to go up here to Digital, and I'm going to add another group call, okay? And in this case, I'm going to call this North America, and it's going to be 93. So when I go up here, I highlight that, I go 93, and then down here, I rename this to, I'm just going to call it NAMER, North America, okay? Let's do one more. Let's add the Parrot here. So the Parrot is 9998. So again, I right-click this, I go add a group call, and I go 9998. I'm going to rename this. I'm going to call it Parrot. Okay, so now I have 3 transmit contacts. Now for the system to work correctly, I also have to add receive contacts. Now, the way that that's done is I go down to receive contacts, right-click it, I go add. Okay, now then, it's going to show me, well, I have available groups and I have a members group. Well, for the first one, I'm going to take SNARS, highlight it. I'm going to add that. And now this, what used to be called RX Contacts 2, is now going to be called SNARS. Now I'm going to right-click. I'm going to add another one. And this one is going to be North America, so I highlight North America, I add it, and I rename this as North America. And finally, we'll take our last one. I'm going to add, and this is going to be the parrot, so I click on parrot, I add it, and this becomes parrot. Okay, so now I have my transmit contacts, I have my receive contacts. Now I can start entering the information for the specific repeaters. When I'm going to do that, first of all, I'm going to go to Zone 1 here. And you'll notice in Zone 1, it shows Channel 1 is basically a dummy channel. There's no useful information for you in there. I'm going to right-click Zone 1, I'm going to rename it, and I'm going to call it Virginia City, because that's the physical location of the repeater that I'm going to use to generate the channel information. Now then, I'm going to go down here to Channel 1, and I'm going to rename this, and I'm going to call this VC SNARS. What that tells me is on the Virginia City repeater, it's on the SNARS channel. And as we look at the information here, we notice, first of all, it is a digital channel. Scan list, we're not going to worry about a scan list right now. Color code. Now this is something that you can get. Now in this case, the Virginia City repeater has a color code of 1. So when I go back over here, so I want to make sure the color code says 1. Now the other thing is repeater slot. Now that's the time slot here. In this case, SNARS is on time slot 2. So what I want to do is I want to change this to 2. Okay? I put in the receive frequency, which in this case is 444.825, so I enter that. The transmit frequency is going to be 5 megahertz above that, so I put in 449.825. Hey, wait a minute. Let me interrupt myself here just a second because I completely skipped over one of the features when you're entering the repeater information. You'll notice right in the center here, there's a place called offset. And what you can do is, typically when you're working with UHF, the offset is virtually always 5 megahertz. So let's just put 5 megahertz in there. Okay, now then, when you enter a receive frequency, like in this case, I put in 442.875 as an example. If you just click mapping, it will automatically add the offset to it and put in the transmit frequency so that you don't have to retype it. And that's a good way to make sure that you don't make errors when you're adding the transmit frequency. So back to our regularly scheduled program. And now we add our contacts to it. Now in transmit contacts, when you click on this, it's going to show the ones available. Well, I want SNARS. Receive contacts, I also want SNARS. Now the other things that you can change here, you can change the power level to high or low depending on what you want to do. Now a lot of times people say to use low as the default, because basically good operating practice says to use the minimum power necessary to establish communications. I have found in my particular area, low power typically has a really hard time hitting the repeaters that I want to use because I'm pretty far away from those repeaters, so I typically default to high power. However, if you're in an urban environment and the repeaters are relatively close, select low power and there you go. Now the other one that comes up is admit criteria, and this essentially it says is what should the radio look for to be allowed into the system. People go back and forth on what's the best system to use. I don't know, but channel free or color code free I'm going to go with color code free. Essentially what that says, if it doesn't see somebody using that color code on that repeater frequency, then you're good to go. And again, if you want to explore that further, you can Google it. You'll find all sorts of articles about what to use in that position. I'll just go with color code right now. Anyhow, so now I have a completed channel. Now I'm going to do something here that you can do with the CS-580 CPS that the Titera MD380 doesn't have. I'm going to right click on this. I'm going to go copy, and then I'm going to click here on Virginia City, and I'm going to go paste. Now then, I have a new channel in here, and I'm going to rename this to something that makes more sense. I'm going to call this VC, and I'm going to call this North America. Okay? That's my new channel. Well, now here I've entered the information. The only things that I need to change the repeater slot back to 1, because that's what is used on this system. So I change this to 1, and I change my groups. I change this to North America. I change this to North America. I've just done my channel. Okay, now I'm going to add one more. I'm going to paste in this. And this is going to be the parrot. So, again, same thing. I change this to repeater slot 1. I change this to parrot. I change this to parrot. And now I've programmed in those repeaters and those channels. Now, obviously, you'll notice on this list, there's only one talk group on time slot 2. So theoretically, what you could do is start with North America, enter that, and then when you do your copy and paste, you don't have to change the time slot, and then as the very last one, you change it to the SNARS and put in time slot 2. It's up to you how you want to do it. Okay, now we have one repeater in the system. Now we have another repeater here, you'll notice. That's the Tahoe repeater. It's on 442.475, same 5 megahertz offset, color code 3, and it's a Brandmeister repeater, not a Seabridge. So let's see how we deal with that. So go up to channels here, right click, and go add. Now I got one that says zone 2. We're going to rename this, and we're going to name this Tahoe. And I want to emphasize, these are only for my area. Your repeaters, your zone names, your channel names are going to be different depending on what you want to do. So don't enter the same stuff that I do. Enter the same type of information. Okay, so at Tahoe, we're going to add a channel now. Here's our channel, digital, blah, blah, blah. Now it's interesting, the Tahoe repeater is on color code 3. So we want to make sure we set this to 3. Okay, and the frequencies, let me slide this over so that we can see this. Well, let's see. How can I do this? Let me move this over. Maybe that'll work. There we go. Okay. So 442.475. And a transmit frequency of 447.475. Okay, now then, the interesting thing about it is the talk groups won't necessarily change between the two. That was one of the things that came out of the coordination of the Brandmeister versus Seabridge. So we can go here, and it just so happens that this repeater does make the SNARS talk group available. So let's click on SNARS and SNARS, and we're going to put that on slot 2, just like that. And admit criteria, color code free. Now we have our new channel, but we're going to have to name this something different. So I'm going to rename this as Tahoe SNARS. How's that? Did I actually get that T in there? Yes, I did. Okay. Tahoe SNARS. Now that we've gotten that as a channel, I can right-click on this. I can go copy. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go paste, paste. Okay, so what I've done is I've essentially put 2 blank channels in. I'm going to add, let's say I want to add TAC 310 to this. So I'm going to go up here. TAC 310 is on time slot 1. And I'm going to select I don't have a TAC 310. How did that happen? Well, let's go back up here to Digital Contacts. And let's add one. Let's add a group call. TAC 310, its ID is, in fact, 310. Okay? And I'm just going to rename this as TAC 310. And then I come down here to Receive Contacts. I add. I put in TAC 310. Rename. TAC 310. There we go. Now then, I can come down here to my new channel, and I can say, well, I want this to be TAC 310. I want this to be TAC 310, and I want this on time slot 1. And now I have my new channel. So let me rename this as Tahoe TAC 310. Now I have a channel here, and I'm going to make this one, I'm going to call this the Parrot brand for the Brandmeister. Now again, I didn't enter that earlier, so let me go back and do that. So I go right-click, add. Now in this case, it's a private call. So I click on private call. I put in 9990. I rename this to Brandmeister Parrot. Okay, now what's interesting is I'm not going to put in a receive contact. And the reason why is because receive contact is necessary only if you're doing a group call, from my understanding of the CPS. If you're doing a private call or an all call, you don't need to put in a receive contact. So on my radio, when I first set it up, I put in the Brandmeister Parrot, and it worked just fine with nothing in the receive contact group. So I'm going to assume that they're correct. So if I go down here, I select that channel, repeater slot 1. I'm going to select Brandmeister Parrot, and on here I'm just going to say none. Okay? And I'm going to rename this as Tahoe Brandmeister Parrot. Okay, so now I have basic channels and repeater information in there. I can program this into my radio. Now I happen to have a radio connected, so I'm going to turn that radio on. You might hear the beep as it starts up. Okay, so I have my radio connected with the programming cable to the computer. I go over here to the W, which means to write. You'll notice that there's a nice green thing that here it says it's connected. I have not given it any program password because I don't want that. Now, if I click OK, it's going to write that file into my radio. It will replace the file that was already in there. Okay? So now, when I look at what's on my radio, and I select, I'm going to go to zones here. I know you can't see this. You're going to have to take my word for it. I have 2 zones. I have Virginia City and I have Tahoe. So that the programming process has worked correctly. I have those. If I select the Tahoe zone, I have Tahoe SNARS, I have Tahoe TAC 310, and I have Tahoe Brandmeister Parrot. So the programming process has been successful, and I was able to get that into the radio. When you're done, just click cancel. And at this point, and I screwed up a little bit. What I would suggest is save the file. Okay, I would save the file, and I would call it something that makes some sense to you. For example, if I go, I'll call this example 1/2/2017, just so that I can keep track of whatever. And I keep this, actually, I have a CS-580 folder in which I keep all of these different things. Anyhow, but I would recommend saving the code plug before you program the radio, just in case something crashes. You don't want to lose all of the work that you put into it. So anyhow, that's the basic way to put stuff in. The radio has a lot of other options, including for scanning and a bunch of other stuff that maybe at some point in the future we'll do. But for right now, this should get you started. And if you have questions or whatever, you can leave them in the comments, or you can email me at N6 Alpha Foxtrot Victor, N6AFV at snars, snars.org, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. Anyhow, 73, and enjoy your radio.